In March, just a little under a year ago, I found out that Stephanie and I were going to have a baby. And that was some of the best news I've ever received in my entire life. We were thrilled to find that out. So that launched us into just a flurry of preparation. We had to get a nursery ready. We had to buy a bunch of baby clothes. We had to throw out a bunch of stuff to make room for the baby clothes. We had to buy diapers and diaper cream and all that stuff. We had tons of doctor's appointments for Stephanie. We did a small gender reveal. We did all this preparation. We were thinking about our future. We were thinking about our baby's future. We were planning and just thinking about everything that was coming with the arrival of this child. And this built up to this just intense anticipation of the arrival of our baby. And honestly, at multiple times, it felt like that day would never come. It felt like last year was one of the longest years of my life just because we were waiting for this baby. But in December, just a couple of months ago, Oliver finally came into our lives, and it was one of the best days that I've ever experienced, and we've loved having him around. Now, take that anticipation for that baby that I just described and multiply it by thousands of years. That is the sort of anticipation that was in the hearts and minds of God's people before Jesus came. Genesis 3:15, I will put conflict between the snake and the woman and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall crush your head and you shall bruise his heel. Ever since those words were recorded in the Bible, God's people were awaiting that seed. They were looking for that seed that would crush the head of the snake. Not Noah, not Abraham, not Isaac, not Jacob, not Joseph, not Moses, not Joshua, not the judges, not Saul, not David, not Solomon, not the prophets, but Jesus. We know who that seed is now. The waiting and the anticipation, and honestly, me making the same points over and over and over, is finally over. We know who that seed is. His name is Jesus. We can see this clearly in a couple of places, especially in the Gospels of the Bible. That's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew 1:1 says, the book of the genealogy just means family tree, of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Matthew lists Jesus' family tree, his genealogy, from Abraham to Jacob to David, all the way to Jesus. He shows that Jesus is the descendant of these men. He is the blessing that God promised Abraham in Genesis 12, and he is the king that God promised David, who would reign on his throne for all time. Another portion of scripture that's important here is Luke 24, verses 26 through 27. This is after Jesus has been crucified and rose from the dead, and he's on this road that leads to a city called Emmaus. And he's talking to two of his disciples, and somehow in this kind of funny story, he keeps them from recognizing who he is. They don't realize that he's risen from the dead. For some reason, they don't recognize him. Jesus says in verses 26 and 27, was it not necessary that the Christ, that's the Messiah, the chosen one of God, was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory? And beginning with Moses, and by Moses it means Genesis through Deuteronomy, Moses wrote those books. Beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them in all the scriptures the things concerning himself. So Jesus himself goes through the scriptures with these two men and points out the places where he is promised and predicted. So those are a couple of places where Jesus is explicitly identified as the Messiah, as the seed, as the blessing of Abraham, as the king from David's line. But what about Jesus' life? What's important about not just Jesus' arrival and his coming to earth, but his actual life? We obviously don't have time to go through all the Gospels and all of Jesus' life. We would be here for a couple of years if we wanted to do that. And you probably know a lot of the stories from the Gospels, a lot of Jesus' miracles and teaching, and a lot of his life before his crucifixion. So let me just break down his life into two main categories. The first category are his miracles. Jesus did many miraculous things. He performed signs like walking on water, feeding the 5,000, bringing Lazarus back to life. He healed a lot of people. He gave sight to the blind. And the second category, the first is his miracles, the second is his teaching. The Gospels record for us many of the things Jesus said and taught and explained, like how he explained to those two men that he was the Messiah. Both of these categories, Jesus' teaching and his miracles, prove a few things. They show us, they reveal to us a few things. They prove that Jesus is that Messiah, that he is that seed, that descendant, that blessing. The Messiah also is a person who's prophesied about a lot in the Psalms and the prophets. And it was said that this chosen one would save God's people. These categories also prove that he is not only the Messiah, not only man, but God himself come in human flesh. He forgives sinners, which only God can do. He makes the lame walk. He opens the eyes of the blind. He does miracles. He does things that are impossible for any other thing or being or person to do besides God. He speaks with wisdom and authority and teaches unlike anyone the people have ever heard from. A few more important things about the life of Jesus. In Jesus' life, he sets an example for how we as his followers are supposed to live. He models what it looks like to live a life of obedience and devotion to God. He lives a perfect, sinless life and models compassion and mercy and justice and love and righteousness and friendship, leadership, service, and many other things that his followers, we, are supposed to imitate. Finally, one of the most comforting things about the life of Jesus is that he understands and empathizes with us. He has been there. Wherever you are in life, he has been there in some way. Jesus is fully God and fully man. He understands what it's like to live in this world and suffer the joys and pains of life. He weeps at the death of Lazarus. He is angry when he sees people abusing the temple. He is tempted by Satan himself, and he was anxious and afraid in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he prayed and asked if the Father could take this cup from him, could take the crucifixion away from him. Hebrews 4:15 says this very clearly. It says, "We do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet was without sin. So let us with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in the time of need." So, Jesus' life proves that he is the seed promised to Adam and Eve. He is the blessing promised to Abraham. He is the eternal king promised to David. He is the Messiah that the prophets predicted. He is God the Son in human flesh. Jesus is the point of the storyline of Scripture.